What if you don't have to defend yourself anymore? Have you noticed how emotionally reactive everybody feels now? One misunderstood text message, only one, and suddenly somebody is writing a 4 paragraph response with bullet points, timestamps, and emotional footnotes. Or a stranger cuts us off in the traffic and suddenly we are delivering a TED talk inside a car about morality, respect, and the collapse of the civilization. Or somebody unfollows us online and now we're lying in bed at 2 in the morning conducting a full psychological investigation. What did I say? Was it the post about sourdough bread, or did they secretly hate me the whole time? Everybody seems emotionally loaded now. Defensive, ready, like we're walking around with invisible courtroom trials happening inside our heads all day long. And we are constantly gathering evidence that we matter, that we're good people, and that we deserve respect, or we deserve to exist. And honestly, it's exhausting.
I'm Maria Crosby, and like you, I'm a lifelong seeker. I've lived enough lives to know how exhausting it can be to keep defending who we think we are. So let's sit with that together for a moment.
I was scrolling through Facebook early in the morning before I worked yesterday and I stopped on someone's profile because I genuinely did not recognize her at first. The photo looked at least 15 years old. Smooth skin, perfect lighting, not a single sign that life ever had stressed her blood pressure even once. And then I looked at mine. Same crime, good angle, soft lighting, slightly away from the camera. That kind of distance where wrinkles don't become apparent anymore. If someone met me in person after seeing that photo, they'd probably become a little bit disoriented, saying like, "Oh, so this is the updated version." But we all do this, not just online, in life. We quietly create a version of ourselves that feels acceptable, and then we spend years defending it. Which is amazing because 5 minutes earlier, I had reheated the same cup of tea 3 times and forgotten where I left my glasses while they were sitting on my head the whole time. But that's what we do. We create a version of ourselves and then spend years protecting it. I felt that very sharply when I think about an incident I had in my private practice. A patient became very angry at me over a delayed visit. And he raised his voice, called me incompetent. And immediately, I felt something rise inside me. Not just irritation, something older than that. The professional who worked hard, the exhausted person who spent years trying to become respectable in a country that did not automatically hand respect, blah, blah, blah. And for a second, I wanted to defend myself. Not because the visit mattered that much, but because my identity did. And that's the part I'm beginning to notice. Most arguments are not really about the argument. They're about the self we think is under attack. Then I remembered an old story about an empty boat. If an empty boat drifts across the river and bumps into your boat, you don't get angry, right? You just push it away. But if somebody happens to be sitting in the boat, suddenly it feels personal. And now you want an apology. Now you want justice. Now your ego enters in full battle armor. And I started wondering how much of my exhaustion comes from constantly trying to defend a version of myself. Honestly, maybe most of it. Trying to appear competent, trying to appear emotionally mature, trying to appear successful, trying to appear just fine, trying to make sure nobody sees the frightened or uncertain parts underneath the current. You know, that is exhausting work because the truth is, life keeps changing us faster than our identities can keep up. When I was younger in the Philippines, I thought I would always be an artist. Drawing tables, pen and ink, comic pages, deadlines. And that felt like my permanent self-image. Then life moved. Suddenly, I was studying the human anatomy, physiology, learning science, learning how to sit beside frightened people, learning how to stay calm while families quietly fall apart in front of me. And somewhere along the way, I kept trying to hold all these versions of myself together, like overpacked luggage. The artist, the immigrant, the healthcare worker, the strong one, the capable one, the wise one, the person who is doing well. But lately, I've been asking myself something uncomfortable. What if? What if peace begins the moment we stop defending all these identities? Not giving up, not becoming passive, just loosening the grip a little. Because I've started noticing something. The people who are most at peace are actually not always the people winning. Sometimes they are simply the people who no longer need every interaction to confirm their worth. And to me, that changes everything. Suddenly, criticism becomes lighter. Misunderstandings become survivable. And you stop treating every disagreement like a threat to your existence. I saw this very clearly working around illness and death. At the bedside of dying people, the performances begin falling away. Nobody says, "Quick, tell everyone I was important." The titles loosen, the old grudges loosen, even pride begins loosening its grip. And sometimes what remains is just one human being sitting quietly beside another human being. No image left to maintain, no role left to perform, just presence. I think about my mother sometimes, late afternoons back home. She would sit in the window and simply watch the light changing on the leaves outside. As a child, I thought she was doing nothing. But now, when I think of it, maybe she was briefly free. Not as a mother or not as a wife, just existing for a moment without needing to prove anything. I don't think I fully know how to live that way yet because I still defend myself too quickly. I still rehearse imaginary arguments in the shower. And still, I want people to understand me correctly. Still, I want to explain my intentions. But I'm beginning to suspect that peace may have less to do with controlling the world and more to do with no longer needing every passing boat on the river to recognize who you are. Maybe that's freedom. I don't know. I'm still learning that. Not winning every battle, not being admired by everybody. Just quietly realizing you no longer need to defend yourself all the time. I'm so glad we could spend this time together. It's these quiet moments, just sitting and noticing things with a friend that remind me why I started this channel in the first place. Go easy on yourself today, and I'll see you in the next video.